Today, we're going to solve by factoring. Our objective is that we will be able to solve equations by factoring. As a reminder, the standard form of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And it's very important that it equals 0 so that we can apply the zero product property, which says if a times b equals 0, then a equals 0 or b equals 0. So what that's saying is if we have two things being multiplied together, one of them has to equal 0 or both of them equal 0. So for example, we have m plus 13 being multiplied with m plus 5. That tells us that either m plus 13 equals 0 or m plus 5 equals 0. That would mean m either equals negative 13 or negative 5. We could also write that as a set in curly brackets. Now in this example, we don't have two things multiplied together yet, so we're going to have to factor it in order to have that multiplication, our product. So the first thing you might notice is this is not equal to 0. So the first thing we need to do is subtract 5x. When we move it to the other side, we want to be sure that we're writing things in the standard form order to make it easier to factor. So it'll be 3x squared minus 5x plus 2 equals 0. Then I can follow my steps for factoring. 3 times 2 equals 6. The factors of 6 are 1 and 6, or 2 and 3. Since we're multiplying to get a positive, but adding to get a negative, we know that they're both negative. And then the pair that adds up to negative 5 would be negative 2 and negative 3. So I'd have 3x squared minus 2x minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. And then I'm going to factor by grouping. So group the first two, group the second two. The first two have an x in common. The second two just have 1 in common, and since I know I want to have a positive 3x and a negative 2 in my parentheses, I'm going to divide by negative 1. Make sure you're writing your equals 0 at each step so that your steps are always equivalent to each other. So then my factors are x minus 1 and 3x minus 2. Set those each equal to 0. And get that x equals 1. And x equals 2/3. So I can either write that as 1 comma 2, x equals 1 comma 2/3, or I can use curly brackets and say 1 and 2/3. Either one of those is an acceptable way to write your answer. So again, we have to start by making it equal 0. As I move these terms from the left to the right, I'm going to make sure that I'm combining like terms and make sure my exponents go from highest to lowest. So I'd have d cubed minus 3d squared minus 10d equals 0. Now you may notice that they all have a d, so I'm going to factor out that greatest common factor first. Now I'm going to ignore that GCF for a little while and I'm going to focus on factoring what's inside. Remember, there's a 1 here, so 1 times negative 10 is negative 10. My factors are 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Since they're multiplying to a negative and add to a negative, I know they're opposite signs, and the bigger ones are going to be negative. So my pair that adds to negative 3 would be 2 and negative 5. Then factor by grouping. So my factors would be d minus 5 and d plus 2. But wait, we need to bring back in our GCF. We're going to write this factor outside each step. Because remember, every step needs to be equivalent. So this time, I have 3 things being multiplied together. That means d could equal 0, d minus 5 could equal 0, or d plus 2 could equal 0. When I solve these, I get that d could equal 0, 5, or negative 2. And again, I could write that as a list in curly brackets as well. If you're in FADA, stop the video here. Algebra 2, continue on to the last example. So, if we look at this, first thing you might notice is that both are divisible by 3, so we're going to factor out a 3 first. Then you should notice that y squared minus 9 is a difference of perfect squares, which using our pattern we know factors to y minus 3 and y plus 3. Now we can take our 3 factors and set them equal to 0. 3 equals 0, y minus 3 equals 0, y plus 3 equals 0. 3 can't equal 0. That doesn't make sense, so that part's irrelevant. We don't need it. Here, y would equal 3, and here y would equal negative 3. So we can say y equals plus or minus 3, or that our set is plus or minus 3. It also would be fine to write y equals negative 3, comma 3, or write them separately in the set as well. Any of those 4 are acceptable ways to write your answer. That's all for today. See you in class.